Hey guys, I'm country music artist Shane Runyon, and I'm proud to sponsor Pit Lane Parlay. Here's a sample of my song that's playing on country radio. It's called Tattoos, a song about second chances and new beginnings. I hope you'll check it out and help a small town guy like me keep climbing the charts.
But I'll still wear them proud every day. These old tattoos remind me of the sins the good Lord washed away.
Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay. My name is host Mike Jokum. Matt and Jess are joining me again, and our guest co-host for today is none other than, we'll keep him known as Faux Will Power. Mr. Fake Power, how are you?
You know, I'm doing great, and I really appreciate you guys having me on the pod. A long-time listener, first-time caller, friend of the pod, but I want to. It means so much to me to be in the likes of other great guests such as Mike Cole, Aaron Telitz, the famous artist, Brian Bellardi, and Jay Fry, and now you have a guy that's sitting in the basement of his mom's house on Twitter all day long. So really excited to be a part of the pod.
We might have to make that our new show, intro, scrap the intro music and just put that on there. Anyway, well, let's dive right into it here. Finally, an off weekend where everybody can kind of collect their breath for a weekend. But there was some testing at Road America this week. But before we talk anything coming up, let's talk Texas, which has obviously been hotly debated for the last handful of days since the race Saturday night. I happened to enjoy the race. I thought it was actually pretty good. I'll turn it over to Matt. I'm going to put you on the spot first. We have to keep the tradition. Your quick thoughts on the Texas race before we dive into any specific Texas topics.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for coming on to the show, Mr. Fake Willpower. It's cool to have you on. You've been someone who's shown up onto my timelines several times over the years, and always a good laugh. Texas, I like the race, kind of like you said. I think there was a lot of enjoyable parts to it. The biggest of which is that I feel like it was a lot in the driver's hands, more than we've seen in the last couple of years. You get the pack racing versus non-pack racing debate. I liked what we saw. I think it's very hard to get the product right at Texas between tires and aerodynamics and whatnot. So I think IndyCar did a really good job. Kind of like I said on Twitter, the only thing I wish I could change about Texas since they redid the track 2 years ago is I really wish that second groove in turns 1 and 2 would come in. I think that would really help the racing because you see guys go. You saw Rossi go side by side a couple of times into turn 1 and nearly lose the back end, and he had to collect it. So overall, I really liked the race. There was a lot of moments kept you on your toes, a lot of kind of plot twists. But overall, yeah, I enjoyed it as much as you, Mike, and as much as many other people did on Twitter. What do you think, Jess?
I enjoyed it. I don't know why everybody was so up in arms. I mean, I guess, for people who haven't been watching for a while, it could have been a little less thrilling than some of the other races that have happened at Texas, but I thought it was fantastic. I mean, really, they have a little room to improve. Obviously, they do need to get the cars a little closer together, but do I want pack racing back? No, I don't.
Mr. Power?
I think Texas was a 10 out of 10 for me. really there are just so many storylines that happen throughout the race between the tire deg issues. I mean, it's nice if you look at people's fantasy picks for the race. It seemed pretty obvious to me. All three Penske drivers, and then whoever was cheapest to fill that fourth spot. Yeah, and it's crazy that in the middle of the race, I don't know how anybody couldn't rate this a 10 out of 10 when all three Penske drivers are having tire blistering issues. Then other storylines, the Hondas making about 3 to 4 additional laps of fuel mileage, forcing the Chevys to go straight into fuel save mode. Marco stalling it and having problems, and then blaming that and saying that he was going to win the race on the radio, plus some additional cussing. It was just an amazing, amazing race with so many different storylines it's exactly what a race in Texas under the lights on a Saturday night should look like.
Yeah, the Marco radio, I saw you comment on this on Twitter during the race, I think, and I wish that was something that we could pull and play for everybody, but I think iTunes would bleep us out immediately. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different storylines. I mean, I remember I texted Matt about 40 or 50 laps into the race, and right when about Power started to, I think Will Power was the first Penske to really start having trouble with his tires, or maybe it was Pagenaud. Either way, one of those guys was the first one to really start slowing down, and I went, how crazy is it that all three Penske guys are now struggling after, just absolutely dominating qualifying? Let's see, let's dive into some Texas discussion here since it's hotly debated. I was happy it wasn't a pack race, like all of you said. I put the race in the driver's hands. As we see, Scott Dixon after the week after we had Mike Hull on, proved why he's one of the best drivers of all time, because he took the race in his hands and just simply dominated when a lot of people were struggling with tires, or maybe in Ed Carpenter's case, driving into another car. And so forth. But I thought it was interesting. There was some unhappy drivers afterwards. Rossi and Newgarden, as we posted on Twitter this week. Rossi was unhappy that lap cars didn't get out of his way. And Newgarden was unhappy with race control being inconsistent. Mr. Fake Power, I think you were there. I don't know if you saw any inconsistency with race control or Newgarden's penalty, because it wasn't shown on TV, but I'll get your thoughts on the penalty issue before we go on to Mr. Rossi.
I think the biggest thing there is just the drive-through penalty at Texas, especially with the issues with pit out and the having to stay under 100 miles an hour until basically the middle of the backstretch. Effectively, that's a 3-lap penalty under a green flag. And for jumping a restart, Joseph's on the last restart. Yeah, he jumped it, but if you give it on a scale of like 1 to 10 Tony Kanans, that was really only like a 2 to 3. So I don't think that type of the advantage that he gained, which by the way he didn't gain any spots, he didn't gain any positions. I don't think that type of a gracious error on Joseph's part is worth a 3-lap penalty.
Well, I was about to ask too. So I think Newgarden was arguing that he didn't advance his position, but if anything, he was just out of line. Is that kind of what you saw from your point of view?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's really it. And I just don't see where that's worth a drive-through at a Texas race where that means so much. Yeah, I mean, it's not like a drive-through at Road America next weekend, which doesn't penalize anybody.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially, at that point, Newgarden had kind of fallen back. I think he was either a lap down or he was
a lap down.
Yeah, and I think he was close to getting his lap back, especially if that last caution, which I think fell, right after his penalty, and that effectively kind of ended his bid to get back up there. But the more interesting one to me is Rossi complaining about lapped cars. Now I know, guys are given the blue flag and are told to get out of the way if they can. But I think Rossi should understand that, sometimes these guys are racing to try to get back on the lead lap, or they're racing and they're giving him room when they can, but they just can't slow down to 100 miles an hour and move over. Did anybody have a problem with what Rossi said? I'll turn it over to anybody on this one.
So I'll take it again. So I think that this is a little bit of that Formula One mindset from his upbringing that's showing. It's not in a car that's being lapped. It's not in their interest to, just completely turn over and let everybody pass them. That's not the way that it works in American open wheel racing. So, I understand Texas is hard without the second group coming in, but there's still cars, the lead cars, Scott Dixon, that were able to get around lap traffic. And really, if you're not able to get around the lap traffic, is your car really that much better than the cars that are?
Matt, Jess?
Go ahead, Jess.
I have to pretty much agree. Things are different here. Why would somebody, essentially pull over and park just because they're not on the lead lap? They're still, racing for points and for money in the end. So that they need to finish the best they can for where they are. So I have to agree on this one. They shouldn't be forced to just get out of the way. They should be able to fight a little bit. Now, granted, should they give a little room? Yes. But should they completely pull over and call it quits? No.
Yeah, and I've kind of echoed what you guys would say. Just before we move on real quick, since it wasn't mentioned in last week's episode, Danica Patrick. Moving on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Fake Willpower that it definitely has an F1 elitist attitude of get out of my way, or, someone like from race control has to make this person get out of my way instead of me just, passing the guy. And maybe Texas 2-3 years ago, it was easier to get out of the way because there was multiple grooves. But if you're Chilton, you get caught up in the gray in turns 1 and 2, you're a goner. So, I didn't mind it. I think the lap cars, even if they're a couple laps down, it's not as easy as it looks to get out of the way on a very fast oval. So I think I agree with the other two that Rossi was a bit out of line.
And I think I'll add on to that. It's at Texas, it's a little different here that those lapped cars were racing other lapped cars. This isn't something like Jordan King going 5 laps down at Road America by himself and not giving up a little bit of space to somebody that's obviously faster than him. This is drivers that were legitimately racing for position with other cars that were in the vicinity. That I don't think that it's realistic to say that they should concede to cars on the lead lap when there's people that are racing for position right after them.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Anything else Texas related anybody wanted to bring up before we move on?
So how many laps do you think Danica would have lapped the field by?
Jess, I'll let you answer that one, Jess.
Yeah, Jess, that's all for you.
Oh, how many laps would she made it before she wrecked, you asked? I would say 5.5.
Oh, Jess.
I do have since it's been a while in Pit Lane Parlay, I do have some breaking news to kind of butt in with here.
Yeah.
NBC or the Indianapolis Star is reporting, I don't know who it came from, but the Indy Star is reporting that Mike Tirico will actually be the host of next year's Indianapolis 500 coverage. And Mike Tirico's big in football, and he does a lot of, I think, like Olympic stuff. And didn't he do the Kentucky Derby as well, I think? So that'd be cool to see.
I don't remember if he did the Kentucky Derby, but I've watched enough football to know that I appreciate his announcership. I think I just made up a word there.
Bumpfully.
Bumpfully, yeah. Thanks, guys. But I think that's a good call, getting a big face out there in front of the Indy 500. Probably we'll bring in the casual crowd that might know Mike Tirico from the football world. So good for NBC. I like to hear these kind of announcements early to see how much effort they're putting into the Indy 500. And Matt, why don't you go into one of our fan questions? We'll take a break from the current news and go into some fan questions.
Sure. Just so everybody's know that right before every episode, we do ask for fan questions if we got time, and we pretty much are going to have time a lot of episodes. So if you don't follow us on Twitter, we are at Pit Lane Parlay. That's PITLANEPARLEY. All one word. Let's see. What's a good fan question for the week? We've had several responses. We'll go with Joseph Aboud. Hopefully I said that right. It's at JOEABBOUD on Twitter. He wants to know where we would put Road America in the world. It's not just America, but in the world rankings of road courses. I'll go ahead and answer that first. To me, sentimental favorite, just based on video games I played growing up. I've always been a huge fan of Spa-Francorchamps. It's a Formula One track in Belgium. Absolutely fantastic track. Got kind of everything you need. I've got high-speed corners, high-speed straights, slow corners, finesse corners. In my opinion, I'd say Road America is definitely the best road course in North America. I don't see why it wouldn't be a top 4 road course in the world, in my opinion. I think every driver who races it has an instant respect for it and appreciates the commitment it takes to get a good lap at Road America. We saw Graham Rahal get out of the car in testing this week and was all giddy about how the new car races there and how fast it carries speed down the straights. So I'd say behind maybe Spa, Monaco, Le Mans, I'd say maybe Road America is probably 4th. I'd probably put it ahead of Monaco just because of sometimes Monaco doesn't produce the greatest of race, even though it's just a jewel and such a great city in Monaco. So I'd probably put Road America maybe 3rd.
I'll step in. I think you have a good argument there. I also, adding into another international track, I've also really always enjoyed watching the races at Monza. I thought it's a pretty cool track in Italy. I like it more than Monaco, actually. So I'll take out Monaco in that 4th spot and put in Monza. But Road America, definitely one of the top 3 in North America. Maybe, God, what else would you put in there? Watkins Glen is another one of my favorite, and unfortunately not on the schedule this year. And maybe Laguna Seca as another one if we're looking at just the U.S. for now. But it's definitely in the top five in the world at least. What do you think, Jess?
I'm gonna say I agree with your North America picks there, except for I would put Road America 2nd behind Watkins Glen probably. But yeah, in the world that's kind of a tough comparison because there's so many different tracks that different cars race on, so it's kind of hard to compare them all. But I definitely top 10, probably top 5. But yeah, I'm gonna say there are some tracks over in Europe that they have a little more finesse, we'll say.
Mr. Fake Power?
I think Nürburgring is also up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I put, but definitely Road America in the top 5. But I think that a clear number 1 track is in the U.S. and IndyCar was actually there a couple of years ago, and it's unfortunate that they're not there again. But I think NOLA is probably the best natural terrain road course in the world.
I'm gonna let Matt jump in here.
Yeah, other than the fact that it produced probably the worst road course race we've seen in the last 10 years. Yeah, it was a spectacular venue.
It was a cool track and a terrible race.
I think that's fair.
I do wish they would. I would like to see them give it another shot in the grand scheme of things if money didn't matter, because I did like the track, but obviously it did produce not really particularly the best race ever. All right, let's go with another fan question, and then we'll jump into some we'll jump into the hot topic of the week. It might have been a fan question, or I don't know how Matt stumbled across it, but Matt, go ahead, and then we'll go to a fun topic here.
Yeah. So since we got Mr. Fake Power on here, Dad Carpenter. That's one word on Twitter. That would be the parody account for Ed Carpenter. He wants to know, in the topic of fake accounts, who is your favorite fake or parody Twitter account other than yourself?
That's a tough one because there's so many. You know, there's even like a Jordan King fake account, which I just don't understand.
Are you sure that's not his real account?
Well, I actually, you'd be surprised, but
it's a burner account.
I don't understand the point of that, but you know, from a parody account, I think Cocky Andretti is pretty good.
Cocky Andretti's funny. Anytime Cocky Andretti shows up in my mentions, it's always a good laugh, and he has some real good tweets.
You know, besides his Sage tweets, I hate his Sage tweets, but. But yeah, I think Cocky, cool guy, and definitely great tweets. Worst fake account. I wish that Carpenter asked that, and that would be Graham Rahall's fake account.
Oh, you mean the one that tells me to get on my mom's basement?
Rahal Graham, yeah. So I'll just put it out there. I've been trying for Real Graham and I've been trying to get fake Graham to actually go to an IndyCar race and trick him into going somewhere that Real Graham's there, so that Real Graham can just berate him for 4 hours or so. But the problem is that guy never goes to IndyCar races. So I don't understand how you can have an opinion on an IndyCar race if you don't go to any of the races. I don't understand how you can run a fake driver parody account and not actually be a fan of the series. But that's just me.
Or ever have a nice thing to say at all, ever.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I'm going to step in here and say, in addition to Mr. Fake Power, I also love Ron Pablo Montoya. Mainly, I mean, he doesn't really tweet anything that's like super hilarious generally, but the fact that his name is Ron Pablo Montoya really just takes the cake. And I think Matt's favorite is probably Not Kimball, because his bio is "You just got Kimbled."
Sounds about right. Jess, do you have a favorite?
I have a couple that I like that are actually not IndyCar related. They're NASCAR related, but they will throw in comments about IndyCar too. NASCarcasm and the Orange Cone, of course. I think they're both pretty damn funny.
So I think a good example of how much the IndyCar fan base likes snarky, funny things. So you look at Cone. Cone's got 86,000 followers.
Jeez.
You look at NASCASM, and he's like 155,000 followers. And then you look at me, and I'm like, I'm with a very respectable, steady 1,200.
Well, you gotta step up your snark game.
Yeah, well, I'm just not that great.
I don't know. Your graph, your little bar graph of comparing Will Power to the Ed Carpenter oval specialist, I got a good crack out of that. Where you basically saying that Will Power's been one of the best oval drivers the last couple of years, and I mean it's almost a statistical fact at this point that he's been one of the best oval drivers in the last couple of years. So
it's absolutely a fact.
Yeah, your content is definitely up there. Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you have to do from a visual standpoint, in addition to that graph, is show anybody the last, 20, 25 laps of Pocono last year and go, this is why Will Power is a fantastic oval driver. And Ed Carpenter hasn't won since 2014.
Has it really been that long? I didn't look that up, but that's...
I think the last race he won 2014 Texas.
Yes, I believe so.
So yeah.
So he never won anything under the manufacturer Aero Kit era?
Did not, no.
Wow.
No, because
I didn't realize that.
2015, wasn't that the year where Ed Carpenter didn't finish in any race? Like he crashed out or had an electrical problem in, I think, all 6 of his races?
That was 2016, I believe.
Okay, so I wasn't far off. Nonetheless, yeah, I think a great point and a great graph that Fake Power put out there. Moving on, Matt, I'll let you bring up this topic, and I think this is going to be our debate of the week.
All right, so it started with a tweet of mine on Twitter. Basically, the subject is Sage Karam a talented driver? And so me and Jess, or Jess and I, sorry for the English, started to debate on Twitter. So let me start with my argument. My argument is that, let me just preface it, I don't like Sage Karam as a person, so this isn't me trying to say that I'm buddy with Sage. I don't really like him as a person. I think he has had some poor showings and crashes too often. I think that covers about my negatives of him. But on the positives, and his road course racecraft is terrible. But speaking from, some positives, I think Sage Karam has that edge and that aggressiveness that I like to see. It's very entertaining. And coupled with that, you can't deny that he's one heck of a driver on the ovals. We've seen, in 2015, I've been kind of going through that season, finished well at Iowa. I believe he got taken out the first turn at Indy, so can't really make anything of that. Did really well at Fontana, was doing really well at Milwaukee until he brushed the wall, was leading at Pocono until he crashed. So it kind of comes back to that, he just needs to finish. But I think his road course skills obviously need work, but that just comes with, more seat time. And, who knows, there was a couple of drivers who just never seemed to get it together with the aero kits on road courses. So maybe that was just a product of him not being used to that car. So I'll go to bat for Sage, even though I don't really like him. But I'll 100% say that he's a very talented driver. And someone I'd love to see this whole Dreyer and Reinbold deal monopolized for 2019 so we can get him back full time.
Jess, I'll get your input before I continue.
So mine comes strictly from, and you said it yourself, he needs to finish more races. I mean, it's hard to say that somebody's talented if he can't bring the car home in one piece. I don't care if he runs 15 laps and they're a great 15 laps. If he wipes out half the field in the next lap, that's a problem. His DNFs are up there. Now, I will give him, and I will say the nice with the bad also. In Indy Lights, he did fantastic on ovals, but in an Indy car, he's not really produced any. We'll say not any. He hasn't really produced enough results to say that he's talented in it.
Yeah, I feel like Sage Karam is one of those, if we're going to relate it to other sports, one of those like guys who would be a first round pick and takes a long time to put it together before he becomes the starting quarterback or 30-goal scorer, I don't know, depending on what sport you follow. Or takes a long time before he becomes the leading guy on his basketball team. The potential is there, and if Dreyer and Reinbold can put something together, whether it be the end of this year or seems more likely to be 2019, will he be the first one to get a shot? Sure, but I think it's he's got to put it together in a hurry on the track. Off the track, he might always be a little bit frustrating to talk to and not particularly the friendliest person I've ever interacted with. But I'll say the potential is there. I'm not going to say the talent is definitely there yet, but he has the potential to be a very good driver if he can put it all together.
What do you think, Mr. Fake Power?
Hey, I get my hot take. All right, so I'm going to give you 3 names. Well, first off, I'm going to set it up. So I really wish Racing Reference would do what kind of like the basketball NBA and the NFL and the baseball stats websites do. And they use analytics and they say that this driver is most similar to, and they give you a list of other drivers. I'm going to give you three names. So Sage Karam, Sebastian Saavedra, and James Jakes. So of those three drivers, very similar results. So looking at average finish over 66 races, James Jakes' average finish in the IndyCar Series was 17.0. Sebastian Saavedra's was 17.9 over 65 races over 7 years. And Sage Karam's average finish is 17.8.
Hang on, hang on. I am not going to let you slide on that. First of all, Sage Karam has what, 15 starts thereabouts?
Yeah, 16.
16. Okay, so 4
years.
of them are Indy. One of them he got wrecked on the first lap by Sato, so that's 33rd. One of them he had a mechanical failure in the 100th. Can't do anything about that. This last one he wrecked. Apparently, there's about 16 different excuses as to why he wrecked, but you can't ignore the fact that he was running 6th at that time. You take that; those are 3 finishes worse than 25th. If you take Jakes, who had how many starts you said, a lot of those races that Jakes was in, the average field size was 23. So that's instantly inflating Karam's average finish. And that's the point. That's why I'm kind of doing this rating system of mine that I'm implementing. So I should be done with 2015 here in a couple of days. We'll see what Karam's rating was like for not only 2015, but his career. And I guarantee it's somewhere around 6.0, which is nothing to turn your nose up at.
You know, the funny part about data analytics is that if you look at Sage Karam's results and you assign excuses to all of the bad results, of course you're going to have a better average finish. But I think there's a statistically significant variable here, which is Sage Karam's career is his average finish is worse than James Jakes, and it's very close to what my favorite Colombian Sebastian Saavedra's finishes are.
That's just a very black and white point of view, so I respectfully disagree.
You know, I can go through Saavedra's career and I can dismiss about 25 of those races too. You know, in the Indy GP in 2015, if he wouldn't have stalled, he would have won it, obviously, just like Sage would have done well if he wouldn't have got wrecked. And
do you mean 2014?
How many Indy 500s has Sage wrecked in?
2.
Yeah, so, well.
No, 3 out of 5.
3. Yeah, so, you know, if Sage wouldn't have wrecked in those 3, then, of course, his average finishes. I can do the same thing with Saavedra. You know, playing with numbers that way is fun, but looking at just the average.
Saavedra is not Saavedra's a bad hill to die on. So, I mean, you could go to bats for, like, different drivers like Tomas Schechter, who, like, you know, had many great races, but just couldn't seem to put it together. But, you know, you need to pick a different hill to die on with Sebastian Saavedra, because that was a driver who was very consistently a back marker. You could maybe attribute it to the equipment he had, but anytime he had a teammate, it seemed like he was doing worse than that teammate. So you might want to pick a different hill to die on.
I think we'll just agree to disagree on this one.
That's fair.
Yeah, and that's what I love about IndyCar. Everybody has different.
I will tag you in all the races that Sage is doing bad, and just so happens to have a wreck that messes up his numbers.
Go for it. I will. Yeah, go ahead. Hopefully, well, and the good news is that if you are tagging me, that means he's racing, which is kind of what I want to see. So.
And then when Sage wins a race.
Oh, you're never gonna let me. I'm never gonna let you live it down. You too, Jess.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening anytime soon. So, I think I'm safe.
Are we still talking about Sage? Because we haven't gotten into what his actual career is since he's not a race car driver anymore.
Isn't he a model now?
No, he's a male model. Yeah, he's a male model for Express.
I didn't even know it was Express.
First one to go from race car driver to male model. So
you know, unfortunately, I don't have the statistics to crunch here, but I'm wondering if we take a random Express male model, what that particular male model's results in the Indy 500 would do comparatively to what Sage's results have been.
Oh, rough. Ouch. I feel the burn all the way from over here. Good debate, though. Please chime in on Twitter. Is Karam a good driver? Does he have unfulfilled potential? Or do you agree with Jess and Mr. Power? I think I happen to fall somewhere in the middle. Nonetheless, Matt, do you want to jump into another fan question?
Let's see.
I have my stump.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
don't we do that
Yeah, go
first?
ahead.
My
Jess.
stump question. So it's my week, so I get to ask the question to stump people and see if I can pull it off. I had one prepared for last week for Texas, but I came up with a new one, so I hope you guys are ready. And the rules are no Googling. You have to know this off the top of your head. So my question relates to the Indianapolis 500. And back, all the way back in 1909,
Oh boy.
they,
boy.
they, IMS wanted to, bring a crowd in. And so they were advertising their spacious infield that had parking spaces for 10,000 automobiles. And how many horse hitching posts did they boast?
Oh,
We should make rules for Stump the Host.
it has to be in the last 50 years.
The last 50 years are
Boring.
something of common knowledge.
No, good question. Maybe we should make this our Twitter poll of the week, because I'm pretty sure between me, Matt, and Mr. Power here, I don't think we're gonna come close. But I'm gonna say, just for the sake of discussion, 2,000.
Okay, and what do the other two say?
Go ahead, Mr.
Yep.
Power.
I wish I had a lifeline and I could call
Donald
my
Davison.
buddies on track for him, because I'm sure that a majority of them were around back then. But I think that you're definitely understating there, Mike. So I would go, man, 15,000, 18,000.
I don't know. I'm a little nervous to answer because I feel like Jess might be that one host from The Weakest Link who's just going to sit there and scold me in her British slang. Gosh. I think it's somewhere in the middle. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe, Mike, what'd you say, 2,000?
2,000, yeah.
I think it's probably closer, maybe 5,000.
All right. So are we making this a poll and I need to not answer it, or can I go ahead and answer it?
No, I say go ahead and answer it. We'll put it on the poll. I'm sure some people will forget after they listen. I know I
Is
would.
it 5? My second
It
guess
is-
is 5.
It is actually 3,000.
Oh, you
Price is
guys.
Right rules means Mike's wins.
I hate to
So
break it to you, but I
They
win.
were pushing for the cars and not the horses. 10,000 parking spots and only 3,000 hitching posts. But
See,
that's pretty crazy. Like, that's a
IMS
lot of horses.
Yeah, IMS is ahead of the times. They saw that revolution coming.
They
Yeah.
sure did.
So, Jess, who got that one closest to right then? That would be me.
And
Okay.
Mike
Yes.
you got the
yes,
over-under.
you did.
you got the over-under right at Indy, and his prediction also did the
Yeah.
best.
I hate to say I'm usually right, but I think I'm usually right.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Anyway, I guess the most interesting article that came out this week was Mark Miles talking about 2019, which has spurred plenty of debate, including the Alonso Mania debate, which is a lot more fun than the Danica Mania debate.
For real.
And I didn't even bring up Danica again, just to bug Jess a little bit. So let's see here. First things first, title sponsor replacement. They seem very optimistic, and I happen to love the fact that NBC is really helping out with the search for a title sponsor. I know Matt and I were texting the other day about who we hope it is. I feel like that's pretty much impossible to predict, because my guess is it's going to come out of left field. But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on the title sponsor search. If you're feeling optimistic about it, maybe you're feeling pessimistic about it. Jess, I don't think I've put you on the spot yet, so it's your turn to jump first.
So, as far as the title sponsor thing goes, Am I just talking about that, or am I talking about Mark Miles in general? His comment.
We'll start with just that, and then we'll work our way down the list.
Okay, because I was gonna go on a rant there, but for the title sponsor, yes, I am. I'm optimistic too. I mean, I think that having NBC on board is obviously a huge step in the right direction for IndyCar. I think, we'll go back to our typical hashtag of NJ Fry We Trust. Like, I think he's doing so many good things. I don't see that, momentum going away anytime in the next few years. So, yeah, I'm optimistic, too. I think that they'll find a good fit. And I do like that everybody's kind of trying to work together, because, honestly, that's going to be the best bet to pull in a sponsor who's obviously going to be putting out some mega dollars, because they'll get the most out of their sponsorship if everyone works together.
Matt or Mr. Power?
So Verizon right now is paying $6 million a year, with another $4 million earmarked towards activation. And Miles is looking for something like 10 to 15 a year in cash, plus an additional 10 mil in activation, which honestly, I'm a huge fan of the series. I just don't see the return on investment for an entitlement sponsor, especially with those type of numbers. I think a good example of that is the fact that Verizon could have renewed on the same exact deal as what they had previously. They chose to pass on it. You look at what's happening on the NASCAR side with Monster. The Monster deal, after having an $80 million a year with cash plus activation with Sprint, NASCAR had to settle for a $20 million a year job with Monster. And you're looking at what IndyCar's asking for with the new NBC deal. It's essentially the same as what Monster is paying for NASCAR, which, from a realistic perspective, would have a significantly higher return on investment than what an IndyCar sponsor would get. So I just don't see the return for a lot of organizations to put money into the entitlement sponsorship with IndyCar when they can get a lot of the same benefits from a primary sponsorship deal of a team, or even really an associate sponsorship deal of the team. So there's definitely a lot of I'm hoping that we get a really good sponsor to sign on, but the IndyCar management definitely has a lot of a strong river current that they're going up against right now to try to get that type of a deal based on what they're asking for.
Yeah, and you make an excellent point, because NASCAR has better ratings, and they have a 36 race schedule. So if you kind of multiply that, that's definitely way more exposure than what IndyCar's kind of, we'll say, poor ratings plus this 16 or 17 race schedule. Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. I don't see any company, just from a dollar and cents point of view, making their money back. It comes down to NJ Fry We Trust, and I know he may not even be heading this this effort, but him and Mark Miles have actually done a really good job recently. I had my skepticisms about Mark Miles when he took over, but I think he's turned it around really well and done a great job for IndyCar. As far as who I'd like to see, I mean, to me, I think it could be someone that just comes out of left field that nobody's kind of anticipating or expecting. So it's kind of anybody's guess at this point, but hopefully they get something announced before the end of the season. I don't think he gave a timeline per se in this last article, but I think I remember last year saying they definitely want to, last year's article said they definitely want to announce it before the end of the season, so people have a general idea of confidence going into next year that they have a title sponsor backing them.
Yeah, I think that let's just say 20 million numbers is I will agree, is definitely going to be very tough to reach. And if they can reach it, then I will buy some NJ Fry and Mark Miles We Trust billboards around the country. Don't hold me to that one,
no,
because that's probably out of my budget. But before we get to our next fan question there, Jess, I'll turn it over to you. I know you wanted to bring up something about this Mark Miles discussion.
Yeah, not anything like super specific, but I got the distinct feeling that Mark Miles was kind of just treading on everything Jay Fry has said, for lack of a better way of putting it. And it's really frustrating. I've talked about, the fans need to work together to bring more fans in. It's the same thing with the management team. You can't basically go into the media saying, no, we're not going to do this, when somebody else has said, hey, we're looking into it, just to be like big man on campus or whatever. Like, come on, guys, work together. Like, Mark, you know better. Like, let's all be one collective team, one collective family to work together and make this a better series, instead of puffing out your chest and saying, absolutely no, we're going to do this instead of this, and I liked it this way, and we're not going to change anything. Like, come on.
Yeah, like the most glaring thing to me was that Mark Miles said, oh, I love double points, and I think it emphasizes the importance of Indy, and I like it at the finale too. Whereas, like, I don't know, like not even 5 days earlier, Jay Fry said, one way we could protect the full-time entries at Indy is by not making a double points race. That way, if they get bumped, it's not a 2-race penalty for them, and thus pretty much ending their championship. So, yeah, that was a little weird. That raised my eyebrows for sure when I read that today.
Yeah, there was that, and then also the qualifying format, when it was like Jay Fry was like, yeah, we can look into changing things, like we want to make it the best for everybody involved, and then he was like, no, we're not changing anything. I loved it. It was a great weekend. So I just felt like there was a butting of heads, like who's going to puff out their chest further, like, come on, guys, we need to work together. Like, maybe there's a happy middle somewhere in there, and it will benefit everyone.
Mr. Power, any opinion?
I've made my stance known on bumping. I don't think that messing with double points is a good solution to that problem. But yeah, in Jay Fry we trust, absolutely. And I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that isn't being released right now to reporters, and definitely isn't known by the fan base. So excited to see what kind of changes are happening going into the future.
Yeah, I guess before we get into that fan question, I know Matt wanted to bring up, the one thing that I did particularly like from the article was the push, to change the season finale to potentially Gateway, although Gateway doesn't want to give up, potentially doesn't want to give up its Saturday night slot, and NBC wants the season finale to be a Sunday afternoon race, which I get. Which got me thinking, is there a track that's currently on the schedule that would fit for the finale? Is Gateway the best option? I kind of would love to see Gateway as the finale, but I'll turn it over to each of you guys before we move on.
Yeah, I'll put on my bias cap. If it was Iowa, I think Iowa is kind of in need of a little stimulus shot. I think it's kind of gone down the last couple of years. I mean, we still go every year, but when I get home and watch it on TV, I'm honestly a little bit unimpressed with recent years. First of all, they need to go back to a Saturday night race. But if NBC wants the finale to be a Sunday afternoon, I think having the finale at Iowa would increase the intensity of the race and really maybe inject some life back into an event that I think kind of needs it, especially with the crowds going down recently. So it might be unrealistic, but I think it'd be pretty cool to see Iowa.
Jess?
So anything... okay, this is, of course, just my opinion. Anything in the Midwest there, so Iowa, Gateway, something in that general vicinity of the country would be fantastic. It allows people to come from all over a little easier than, the majority of the fan base, let's say, living in Indianapolis and having to travel all the way across the country. It makes it expensive. It makes it time-consuming. I think getting the country to meet in the middle would be a fantastic idea. And obviously there are some tracks there that produce good races. And yeah, hopefully they can look at something else. And I don't know. I'm just not thrilled the last couple of years with what the finale has been. So hopefully they can find something that's better.
Mr. Power?
I understand a lot of the fervor around Sonoma, but honestly, I think Sonoma is a pretty decent end of the season event. And I'm looking at that from more than just the racing product on TV. I'm looking at it from at track experience, but more importantly, looking at it from an IndyCar partner experience. So I think one of the biggest returns for IndyCar is the fact that in Sonoma, you can bring your B2B partners, you can wine and dine them in wine country, and you can show them a good time. If you ask any IndyCar partner, so whether that's a team owner, whether that's a sponsor, whether it's a driver, they absolutely love the Sonoma area for the final race of the season. Where Sonoma doesn't really play course right now is just the racing product. So I think if the racing product at that track can be improved, it's going to be probably one of the best places that we can end the season. I can't see bringing out the CEO of whoever's the new title sponsor and then showing them what Newton, Iowa is, and have that try to build up the prestige of the series and have the series end up in Newton, Iowa. Then it just doesn't make sense to me. Whereas you can take potential partners this year, you can show them Sonoma County, you can show them the beautiful track, you can show them all the cool things that are happening there, the fog in the morning, you can show them the vortexes that come off the wings in the morning practice on Friday morning, and you can really get them built into the series in Sonoma. But that's not something that happens in cow country, Iowa, or I'm sorry, what is it? It's corn country.
Yeah, it's all the same. I think you guys all made fantastic points there. The sponsorship engagement in Sonoma is one that is especially important in today's IndyCar. So I'm not going to argue with that. I would like to see it at Gateway, but then again, now, Mr. Power, you've got my mind running in the whole, entitlement sponsor CEO showing up thing. But anyway, now that we're hitting the 52-minute mark here, there's one more fan question to lead us into another topic before we get to our pitfalls. So, Matt, I will let you go in with the question.
Yeah, it's from our buddy Butts' Nuts 4 on Twitter, George Butts. So I believe he's on his honeymoon right now. So congrats on that marriage. Hope everything's going well. Kind of to preface this question, an article came out this week saying that many teams were interested in Colton Herta. The obvious assumption is that even if Herta doesn't win the Indy Lights Championship, he's going to be moving up to IndyCar with George Steinbrenner IV and potentially maybe an Andretti partnership. So an additional car next year to Andretti. And then obviously Alonso Mania is going on. So George Butts wants to know, with potentially Alonso coming to IndyCar plus Herta, and I believe everybody but Marco signed on for next year at Andretti. What's going to give? Are they going to actually run six cars, or is one of them gonna get bumped out and they maybe do just 5 cars next year?
I'll take the reins here first. Is it time for Marco to be an Indy 500 specialist? I think he's got, what is it here? We're mid-June, so he's got another 3 months to really put down some good results. I can't see Marco being an Indy 500 specialist as soon as next year, but he's had plenty of time to prove himself, and as we know, hasn't quite done that yet. So I'm going to throw out the prediction now that Herta and Alonso will both be at Andretti next year in their respective, team partnerships. Still kind of crazy to think that George Steinbrenner IV is going to be an IndyCar team owner and younger than all of us. A little jealous, but that's what you get when your last name's Steinbrenner. And I think maybe we've reached the time that Marco will be, maybe an Indy 500 specialist. I just can't see them, being able to do 6 cars full time next year. But
I think. I think that's a perfect segue into Mr. Power. I want to see. Now we're talking about Marco. I want to hear what Mr. Fake Power has to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm going to take grief with your terminology. I can't see Marco being called an Indy 500 specialist.
Okay, that's all right. All right. Can I rephrase? An Indy 500 only entrant.
There you go. Yeah. So I see Marco like maybe, I don't know, Star Mazda. I think there might be a seat there for him.
Oh man.
But in reality, though, yeah, I can see him cutting down just to the 500. Honestly, though, I don't see Alonso running the full season. I know that's what everybody on Twitter is, and IndyCar Twitter is really like getting crazy about. But I don't see him running the full IndyCar season. I see him going to certain events, but I think he's going to be a part-time, like a Shank type of a schedule.
Would you rather see like Lando Norris or Stoffel Van Dorn come over full time?
Yeah, I think that's inevitably what's going to happen with McLaren. But I think they're going to start off with like a Shank partnership where they race 4 races. Alonso goes, he's able to race Le Mans, he's able to race, other races and other series that he wants to. Maybe do, like the what is it called? The crap, I can't think of it.
Describe it.
Crown.
Yeah.
The Triple Crown.
I mean, basically, he can go after the Triple Crown. He can race in any event that he wants to. I don't see him being constrained to the full IndyCar schedule. So, it makes more sense for McLaren to start off with that partnership, and then they can have a full-time entry, and they can run Alonso as an Indy 500 plus entrant in other events. So that's what I see happening. Plus the fact that if Marco's not running the full season, I don't even really know what I would do with myself. I think races would be half as fun. My scanner basically is perma into Marco's scanner frequency, so that's really all I listen to during the race. I just don't know what I would do with myself. So for my sanity, it would be great if Marco stayed as a full-time entrant in the Verizon IndyCar series, but the realities of economics, the realities of the fact that he's not a good IndyCar driver, the realities of not living up to his last name are really going to catch up to him at some point.
Jess?
Was that harsh?
So what
Well, let's leave it. Let's see what Jess has to say before we determine if it was harsh.
I don't know that it was harsh or not. However, what I heard there at the end is Major Pharma will get a big boost in antidepressant sales should Marco not be in IndyCar full time anymore.
Okay. Maybe Fake Power's point wasn't as harsh now.
So I'm calling out the fans who are still really into Marco. No, I can see Marco being we'll call him a part-timer. Maybe he'll come for more than just the 500, but honestly, I think Marco just wants to be famous for being famous at this point. I mean, that's all he ever posts about or anything now. It's not, there's not a whole lot of racing going on his social media or anything. And I think his best racing might be behind him, unfortunately, for him and the people who love him. I am not a huge Marco fan. as a person, I think he's fine. As a racer, he's just not up to par. But as far as Alonso goes, I could almost see him running like one full IndyCar season just to try to get a championship, and then after that going and doing just kind of whatever he was, kind of like a semi-retirement type of deal where he just races what he wants and forget championships, forget the pressure, just go out and have fun. But I do hope we see him, and I am part of the whole Alonso mania. I do want him over here bad.
Yeah, it would definitely be cool. Matt, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of add into everything, I'll take the other stance. I don't think Marco's going anywhere. I don't think his dad would allow him to. I think his dad would pay for his ride, even if it comes out of his own pocket. And maybe what's happening now anyways. But so I think in a realistic world, the one entry that could go away would probably be the Herta Steinbrenner one, especially if Steinbrenner has funding. I think that could easily go to like a team. Like Mike Hall said last week, we're looking for, an entry that we could put a driver into. It could, Ganassi makes sense, but I don't know if they'd take the money then per se. So, but they could easily find a team on the grid to partner with. I just don't know if it would be what they were looking for. But yeah, and I think I said a couple of years ago in a blog post that I think the one thing that could really resurrect Marco's career is if he left Andretti Autosport and just tried his hand somewhere else, especially with these new teams coming up. I mean, I don't think he would have any problem finding sponsorship, not because he has anything to point to in his path to say, hey, look how good I am, but more just because of that Andretti name. And, if he got a new sponsor and went to a new team, people would buy buy all that merchandise pretty quick. It'd be good exposure for the sponsor. So, and it would take away that safety net that's kind of been following him his entire career. I feel like that's one of the reasons he's kind of, I'll go ahead and say, I think he's kind of failed. I don't see where people get their arguments from saying that Marco, has had a good career. He's got 2 wins and 200-something starts, and sure, he's come close a couple times and had some things not go his way, but that's any driver can say that. So, I'm kind of ready for Marco to not be full-time, but I don't see him going anywhere anyways.
Hashtag Marco to McLaren.
There's a hashtag. There's a new hashtag.
Marco McLaren. Yeah. I think, Matt, you make a good point. Maybe we can see a Ludacris-sponsored Marco Andretti entry because, Luda does love him some Marco. That's about as much as I know about Ludacris. So anyway, do we have anything else to get to before the pitfalls this week?
I don't think so.
We do. I think we covered a lot, and we're jumping over an hour here. All right, we'll save the Road America preview for next week. I'm definitely excited for the race. Before we get to the pitfalls, shout out to Turf Monkey Lawn Care. They are based actually in Road America country, sponsoring us for the next couple weeks, and will probably not be sponsoring Marco anytime. If I know Mr. Marty correct, I don't think he'll be sponsoring Marco. But shout out to Turf Monkey Lawn Care. You can find them on Instagram, Turf Monkey Lawn Care, and Facebook. It's called Turf Monkey. So if you need your lawn serviced or some plants and trees like my backyard does, give him a call. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to come to Philly from Wisconsin, but nonetheless, thank you to Marty and Turf Monkey for sponsoring, and be sure to listen to the show Friday afternoon at 3:15, wildfireradio.com. Apparently, I've been saying wildfireradiosports.com, and that's not actually where the live show is. For the last, 4 months I've been saying that, so my bad. Pitfalls, Mr. Fake Power, since you are our honorary guest for the day, for the week, we will let you start it off.
Mine goes to Eddie Gossage for saying that his race should be the race immediately after the Indy 500. That I understand that we want to have an oval right after another oval. But come on, Eddie, stop being such a waker. You know, Roger put together the Detroit GP. It's a great event. It put some pretty decent racing on. It's a great event for all the sponsors. It's a great event to bring in the manufacturers. So that makes sense. But if you don't want to have Detroit afterwards, it's completely understandable. It's not the best racing. You know, why don't we just bring back Cleveland then? If we're going to have a race that's after the 500 and it's not going to be Detroit, why don't we bring back Cleveland? Cleveland was amazing. So, see that, Eddie, if you're arguing for that, don't argue for your race. Argue to bring back Cleveland.
Yeah, you know, it's a good argument, especially, you know, I'm sure everybody saw Marshall Pruett and Eddie going back and forth on Twitter. I think it was last night, and, you know, I don't always agree with Marshall Pruett. I don't think I've ever made that a secret on the show, but, I mean, Marshall had a hell of an argument last night. You know, look it up on Twitter. We don't need to replay it tweet by tweet, but, you know, like Mr. Fake Power said, it'd be cool if it was, you know, something like Cleveland, but, you know, Detroit's not a bad race. It's actually better this year than it's definitely been. And when Roger Penske, you know, is instrumental behind that, I think it's definitely important to keep Roger Penske or the Penske clan happy. So good start to the pitfall. Matt or Jess, do you want to take it next?
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. Mine goes to Ed Carpenter. I'll keep it kind of short this week. Ed Carpenter took out Robert Wickens, who I believe was somewhere in the top 5. I think he was like 3rd or something. To Ed's credit, he was very apologetic and said he owned up to it. He said, my bad. It was my fault. I completely turned into him. But it's just such a shame for Wickens. That's the 3rd event this year where he's kind of just had something where he had a really good result going, and it just, something happened out of his control. At St. Pete, he was taken out by Rossi. At Long Beach, he had a gearbox failure while running in the top 8, I think. And then, now this, where he had a really good night going, was leading a bunch of laps, poised for another good result, and then just gets turned down on by Ed Carpenter, who was a lap down. Again, Ed, credit to Ed for taking responsibility and ownership of that. He didn't, deflect or dodge. But, for a guy who, as Mr. Fake Willpower pointed out, an oval specialist, you think he would know better. So my pitfall this week's Ed Carpenter.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I'll step in. I'll let Jess go last in case she's still figuring hers out. Tony Kanaan, before the Texas race, said the race is going to be super boring. Nothing's going to happen. The fans shouldn't be excited, blah, blah, blah. I might be making up his words, but that's pretty much what he said in a nutshell. I might be exaggerating his words. And I don't think he was the only driver to say that, but he was the most public about it. I get that, you're nervous, especially at Texas when there were some tire blistering issues in practice and guys were struggling to handle the car in qualifying. But don't say that before the race. First off, you never know how the race is going to play out. As we saw, the Texas race was pretty good, and I think every driver, for the most part, had enjoyed their race unless they got crashed out, like Robert Wickens, and even then, he still had a hell of a race for the most part. So, and also, we don't need that kind of, like Jess said, fans need to work with fans to bring each other together for the sport, and Mark Miles and Jay Fry need to be on the same page because obviously Mark Miles wasn't. Fans are going to look at this and go, well, now I'm not going to tune in, and I'm sure that Tony Kanaan didn't have that much of an impact on the not so great TV ratings on Saturday night, but it definitely didn't help. So, if it happened to be a super boring race and he said that afterwards, I would have nothing to argue with. And unless you guys want to chime in, I'll turn it over to Jess.
Okay, so mine is going to tie everything that you all just said together. So I'm going to pitfall Texas's TV rating It was down 40% this year, which is pretty huge. I mean, honestly, that's a huge number when you're thinking about it, down 40%. So, Eddie, that makes it real hard to go to Texas next. TK, please don't say anything that would make people not watch any more than they're already not watching.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's just that's the ratings are already, like we have previously discussed on other episodes, they're going down. They're going down because there's other ways to watch. There's other ways to get the information, social media, streaming, whatever you do to get the information that's going on at the racetrack. That's cool. But, of course, unfortunately, they still use TV ratings for a lot of things, especially sponsorships. And, going down 40% it's just kind of extreme.
Yeah, I forget who I said this to this week, but I would kill to see what streaming numbers are. I know Matt has said he's going to be canceling cable TV for Hulu Live in the fall. I have considered it off and on for a while. I've actually used Hulu Live TV before I lived in my current house, and I've checked out YouTube TV, and I've seen streaming numbers not for IndyCar but for something else TV related, and I've been looking for 3 days and can't find what it was, but I really wish we could get a sense of what the streaming numbers are. I think it might be more than we expect. I mean, it might not be a huge number at all, but I feel like if IndyCar can say, hey, listen, we have another 150, 200,000 people, whatever, that are streaming, that can't be a bad thing. I don't know if anybody else has any opinions on that, but I wish there was a way to see the streaming numbers. I don't even know if it's possible.
I think that's reflective on the new TV contract. So looking at what NBC is going to be doing with NBC Gold, the majority of the future of sports live broadcasting is going to be an OTT product. So IndyCars did well. They have a short-term contract with NBC, including an OTT product. But then if you look at what Formula One's doing, to show you the value of what streaming is into the future, Formula One basically is giving ESPN and ABC U.S. broadcast rights completely free. So they're not gaining anything from ABC for that, just so that they have the ability to still be on TV and still gain viewers that way, but then be able to monetize their new Formula One app, which is a season late. But that's how much the OTT product means for Formula One, that they're essentially giving away that full revenue stream of live television in the biggest market of the United States, just so that they can gain the revenue of their eventual streaming application. So hopefully IndyCar's all on top of that. It looks like with the way that the current television contract is negotiated, that it looks like they are. But I wouldn't be surprised here in 5 years to see a majority of the viewership based on streaming platform.
Yeah, I can't disagree, especially for anybody our age. I'm sure I'll probably be there in the near future if my cable bill keeps going up like it does. Anyway, guys, is there anything else anybody wants to bring up before we sign off?
I do have to say good riddance to ABC, since we're talking about television.
Yes. Yep, that's fair.
And I know that for all of you that watch the races at home, it's going to be great to be reminded every week that there was that one race in Phoenix that Paul Tracy had the whole field lap before he wrecked. But now that ABC's gone, who's going to constantly remind us that Eddie Cheever won an Indy 500?
Or that Scott Goodyear didn't. One last thing to say before we get it to Jess is Danica Patrick.
Yes, and with that, Jess, I'll let you sign it off.
And guys, keep your lug nuts tight.